The NBA playoffs are just over 1 month away, and with plenty of movement around the league since the trade deadline, here are 3 of my bold predictions on how things play out. Now, if you do enjoy the video, I'd really appreciate it if you can like, comment, and hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, my first prediction is that the number 2 seed Grizzlies get bounced in the very first round of the playoffs by whoever ends up getting that 7 seed in the Western Conference play-in, whether it be the Pelicans, Lakers, Warriors, Mavericks, or Clippers. Disclaimer, if it's the Trailblazers or the Oklahoma City Thunder, I do think the Grizzlies will win. But with that being said, the Grizzlies have a 7-12 record ever since the Shannon Sharpe incident, which, you don't really think it seems like much until you realize that that incident right there, with all the media coverage that it got, really stamped the Grizzlies as the villains of the NBA. And now that they do have that target on their back, which equates to more pressure this postseason. Now, a lot of this stems from Dillon Brooks being the player that he is, talking a lot of crap on and off the court, but without having the play to really justify it. He's really much more of a dirty player these days and is very inefficient offensively. And recently you got Ja Morant obviously flashing a handgun on Instagram Live at a nightclub, who's been suspended for 2 games, but there's a pretty decent chance that he could be out indefinitely, maybe even out for the playoffs. But for this assumption, I'm just going to assume he's fully healthy. The locker room is probably going to be a disaster. Steven Adams held a players-only meeting. There's a lot going down there. Brandon Clark tore his Achilles and is out for the entire season. So, even without all this issue with Ja Morant, I do think that the Grizzlies weren't really trending in the right direction. But with all this media coverage and all that kind of stuff, I do think that they're very prone to getting beat in the first round. Now, of the teams I mentioned, the hopefully will be getting Zion back at some point. They are 17-12 with Zion Williamson, which is a top 4 record in the West, versus 14-22 without Zion, which, percentage-wise is only better than the Rockets and the Spurs. Not to mention, they're actually 8-22 in their last 30 games, which has dropped the Pelicans from the 1 seed, in case you forgot that they had at the start of the season, to now the 12 seed. The Lakers, meanwhile, have revamped their entire roster, adding D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt, who's already a huge fan favorite, Rui Hachimura, and Mo Bamba. And they still got guys like Dennis Schroeder, Austin Reeves, and Troy Brown Jr. coming off the bench. Heck, even Wenyen Gabriel and Lonnie Walker are very serviceable role players. And in the case of Lonnie Walker, he was actually exceeding expectations as a starter earlier this season and playing far beyond what he was asked to do. And now he's warming the bench. And so this Lakers team shouldn't really be judged by their record and their position in the standings right now, because they're a completely different team. They're 6-3 in their last 9 games, and that's with LeBron playing in only 3 of those games and Russell playing in only 4 of them. And Anthony Davis, as of late, he's really bounced back from that foot injury. He is looking like that MVP candidate, or I should say maybe playing at an MVP level that he was earlier in the season. So when fully healthy, I really do not see the Grizzlies, even without all the drama that's going around their team right now, beating the Lakers in a 7-game series. LeBron and AD are just too good. And now that they've got the right team around them, they've got all that depth, they've got size, they've got shooting. I just don't see a world in where Ja Morant and the Grizzlies beat the Lakers. And so, moving on, we've got the Clippers. Now, they have slowed down a little bit since the Russ acquisition. I believe they're 1-5 with Russ, which I do think that's more of a coaching issue in Ty Lue rather than Russ's play style. I think Russ is actually a good fit for the team, given that they don't really have much point guard depth outside of Terrence Mann, and Bones Highland is quite arguably one of the worst defenders in the NBA, if not the worst, and he's a shot chucker offensively, so the grass isn't always green on the other side. So I think Russ is actually a great fit for the team, but the issue is that Ty Lue isn't starting Terrence Mann, which he should be. Terrence Mann was playing excellent as a starter, and the Clippers were playing great with Mann as a starter ever since they let go of Reggie Jackson. And I think another issue is that Marcus Morris Sr. shouldn't be getting the minutes that he's playing. Batum and Robert Covington are much better, but yet Ty Lue has some type of infatuation with Morris Sr. Overall, I think Kawhi's really found his groove as of late. And I think when you look at their team, the way it's constructed, you got Kawhi, Paul George, obviously you got Mann, Russ, Rocco. They're a very deep team. They are missing Norman Powell, but again, they're very deep. They're led by 2 veteran stars, one of which is a superstar when healthy. Again, I just don't see the Grizzlies beating this Clippers team in a 7-game series, especially when you got Paul George and Kawhi guarding Morant and Desmond Bane. It's just not going to work out well for the Grizzlies. And then you got the Mavericks, who I think are still in a transitional phase in integrating Kyrie into the lineup. They are 4-5 with Kyrie since getting him. However, I think that, when you're looking at the first round of the playoffs, no matter how good your team is, no one wants to face Kyrie and Luka on a team together in a 7-game series. I think their offensive talent, when switched on, is enough to beat anyone in a 7-game series. So I don't think that, an inexperienced team like the Grizzlies will have what it takes to take them down. Similar to the Clippers, I do think that the Mavericks, a lot of their issues have got to do with, head coach Jason Kidd and his rotations. I don't think he's playing Christian Wood nearly enough as he should be. But, I don't think that the options that he's playing, Dwight Powell, he's a decent player. I don't think he's, should be in the rotation, but I just don't understand why Christian Wood's minutes have gone to under 20 minutes a game in his last 10 games. I know his defense isn't great, but the Mavericks as a whole don't have great defense. So, why not just excel their offense instead, right? So I do think, again, when healthy, the Mavericks are more than capable of beating the Grizzlies. And if I'm a betting man, I would put my money on the Mavericks. And, a similar thing can be also said for the Golden State Warriors, who, I know they've struggled quite a fair bit this season. They're pretty disappointing overall, but they are the defending champions. They just got Steph Curry back. They've been dealing with a lot of injuries to Steph Curry. Draymond Green's missed some games. Andrew Wiggins has been in and out of the lineup, I think, the entire season. As of late, though, Klay Thompson has been playing excellent, and the Warriors are 6-3 in their last 9 games. So I think, the Warriors being the Warriors and being the defending champs that they are, and with the Splash Brothers, being the Splash Brothers, I just don't think the Grizzlies, again, have what it takes to beat the Warriors. The Warriors are proven. They're a veteran team. They're well coached. They have great depth. All their players know their roles. I just don't think the Grizzlies can beat them. So that's my first prediction. The Grizzlies bow out of the playoffs in the very first round. Prediction number 2. I have the Heat or the Raptors, whoever ends up in that 7 seed in the Eastern Conference, pushing the Celtics to 7 games in the very first round. However, I do think that the Celtics do end up on top. Now, to set the record straight, I am a Celtics fan myself, and so anything that I am saying here is pretty much the opposite of being biased. So, the Celtics are coming off 3 straight losses in which they were leading by double digits against the Nets, Knicks, and the Cavs. Overall, the Celtics are cooling off at the wrong time, which is quite the opposite to last season. The Celtics are 11-9 in their last 20 games, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of their players are slumping as of late. Tatum hasn't been good since the All-Star break at all. In fact, I don't think he's been good in 2023 as a whole, except for a few games. Smart hasn't looked the same ever since he's come back from that sprained ankle. Grant Williams, I don't even know where to start. He blew 2 free throws in this Cavs games, as we all saw, when he was talking a lot of crap to Donovan Mitchell, saying that he was going to hit them both. Overall, he's just lost pretty much all his confidence in his shot. Every single time he catches the ball for an open 3, he pump fakes, sidesteps, or he pump fakes and dribble drives, and half the time he ends up traveling. The other half, he ends up throwing it away. He just hasn't looked good overall. Moscato is called off after a hot start in the green. Robert Williams is out for a week or so with a strained hamstring, and even when he has played, it's sad to say, but he just hasn't looked the same as he did pre-injury last season. I think that knee surgery really has impacted his game. So hopefully he does bounce back with, even more time off this off season, but he just hasn't looked that great. And so I do think that the Heat or the Raptors do end up with that eventual 7 seed, beating out the Atlanta Hawks. And I think that some teams just have your number, regardless of their record. And I think in the Celtics case, both the Heat and Raptors do have the Celtics' number. And I mean that even if the Heat and the Raptors were to go 20-62 over the course of a season, I think they'll push the Celtics to a 7-game series. Now, the last time the Celtics played either of the 2 teams in the playoffs, the series went to 7 games. The last time they played the Heat was in the last playoffs, where it went to 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals, where it did go to a game 7, and the Celtics did eventually come out on top. And in 2020, we also saw the Celtics play the Raptors, which went to 7 games, and they also played the Heat, which went to 6 games, with the Heat eventually coming out on top. Now, Tatum and Brown, historically speaking, have struggled against long, rangy defenders and physical teams. And I think the Raptors are pretty much as lengthy, no homo, as it gets, with OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, Otto Porter Jr., Thaddeus Young. We all know that the Raptors front office has an obsession with guys who are 6'9" tall and boast a lot of length. The Raptors also added a legit center at the trade deadline in Jakob Poeltl, and a 6-4, which is a decent record since the acquisition. And Poeltl himself has been playing quite well. The Miami Heat, meanwhile, are a very physical, scrappy, hard-nosed team. I have nothing but respect for Jimmy Butler. He always seems to push the Celtics to the absolute limit. And I think, honestly, you could put Jimmy Butler, myself, and a bunch of guys from my local team, and I think we would still give the Celtics a bit of issues. That's how good I think Jimmy Butler is, especially when he's playing against Boston. And so I think overall, when you look at both of these teams, I do think they're scrappy. I do think they're physical. I do think they pose a lot of problems for the Celtics. But I do think also on the flip side that the Celtics have been a better team overall throughout the entire course of the season. They obviously have that veteran experience, coming out of the finals loss last season. And so overall, I do think the Celtics will win, but that doesn't mean that, I do think either of these teams, the Heat or the Raptors, will again push the Celtics to a 7-game series in an absolute slugfest. Prediction number 3. The Philadelphia 76ers get eliminated by the second round of the playoffs, and Joel Embiid requests a trade from the team. Now, this is a very bold prediction, but it wouldn't be called a bold prediction if it wasn't controversial. And so there's a very strong chance this doesn't happen at all, but that's why it's a bold prediction. Now, Doc Rivers, first and foremost, just isn't the right coach for the team. I think the 76ers peaked in 2019 when they had Jimmy Butler. And, when you look at them the past few years, the front office has put all different types of roster constructions around Embiid, most of which look great on paper, but none of them have been that effective. They've had guys like Simmons, back when it was good, JJ Redick, Jimmy Butler, Robert Covington, Danny Green. The list goes on in terms of, the 76ers having a lot of serviceable role players. And even today's team, the 76ers bench, on paper, is great. You've got Montrezl Harrell, former 6th Man of the Year. Shake Milton, that guy's a microwave of a scorer, and when he does get minutes, he usually performs. DeAnthony Melton, very respectable 3-and-D guy in the NBA. George Niang, hits a lot of threes, doesn't do much else, but he seems like a great guy to have on your team, very high energy. Jalen McDaniels, long, rangy defender, very good fit for the team as well. Even Daniel House, he was playing well in Houston, and ever since he got to Philadelphia, he just hasn't been the same player. But like I said, these are great players on paper, and Doc Rivers he isn't getting the most out of what is given. And so a lot of it does come back to coaching, but I do think some of it is also, they do have limited roster flexibility with Tobias Harris's massive contract. But again, like I said, despite that massive contract, they put together very good players on paper, supporting Embiid, and they just can't get it done. You look at James Harden now, he is, whether we want to admit it or not, he is slowly declining. His first step in overall athleticism and explosiveness just isn't the same as it once was. And, you have to ask the question, is 2023 James Harden still a number 2 guy on a championship team? And to answer that question, I myself am not so sure. I think that the 76ers are built on paper in a way that, Harden doesn't have to be that number 2 guy. You got guys like Maxey and Tobias Harris who they can step up. A lot of Sixers fans bash on Tobias Harris, but he's a very good player. Just doesn't, he's just being relegated to a standalone 3-point shooter. That's not who he is. And so, you look at all these factors and you look at the fact that Embiid is a very passionate player. He wants to win. And so you got to ask yourself, how much more can he tolerate, getting bounced early in the playoffs and being a constant disappointment? Not Embiid himself, the 76ers being a constant disappointment after having great rosters on paper year after year. I don't think he's going to want to tolerate that. I think, if the 76ers disappoint again, I really do think that something has to change, whether it's someone in the front office, whether Doc Rivers finally gets sacked, or if none of those happens, I think Embiid requests a trade. So there you have it. That's my 3 bold predictions for the NBA playoffs this year. Again, some of them are juicier and more bold than others, but overall, those are my thoughts. But, obviously leave a comment in the comment section if you agree, disagree. like or dislike the video, whatever you want to do. But if you do subscribe, I will greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.